What's up, skibbity rizzlers? So today we're talking about everyone's favorite topic, training volume. How much should you do in the gym? Now, I know what you're thinking. You're also thinking, Geoff, are you caffeinated? The truth is, I'm always caffeinated. And I want to talk about how I've kind of rethought training volume and why I do less volume than I used to, despite being more advanced. So I used to think that training volume would just go up and up and up and up and up. So beginners did the least, intermediates would have to do more, advanced would have to do even more, and the truly elite would be the guys doing the most training volume. Because science, I don't know, it was just sort of this myth that I had built up in my mind. The truth is, it's probably not entirely accurate, at least in all cases. Now, the first reason why my training volume is a little bit less than it was back in like 2022 or so is that I'm just pushing myself harder. When I go back and I rewatch old footage, more often than not, I think, okay, maybe I stopped a little bit earlier, or I would have pushed just a little bit harder, and in some cases, quite a lot harder. And it's kind of just simple math. The harder you are pushing your sets, the fewer the number of sets that you can do and still recover. Because usually it's not a work capacity issue, it's an ability to recover capacity issue. So I could do a lot of work, but I wasn't always recovering from it. And I still grew, but I think actually I would have been better with a little bit less. And when I do a set now, I put everything into it. I lay it all on the line. Generally, I'm not keeping reps in reserve unless it's maybe a back squat or something. And even then, I'm going pretty darn close to failure. I think that mentality of I don't have that many sets, therefore I need to make the sets count, is probably a good one to have. And I'm not entirely opposed to something like a high intensity training, especially when you're starting out, because developing that mindset of I'm going to push this set really, really hard, super, super important. And I see a lot of beginners doing way, way, way too much volume, and they would undoubtedly grow better with less. The second reason I would say is that I have better technique. Now, technique is pretty individual, and I still use momentum on a lot of different lifts, but I've learned a lot about biomechanics over the past 2 or 3 years. And so, especially with some areas like the chest, like the back, I can tell that I am working the tissues and the fibers that I want to work much more effectively. So a lot of the times when someone is doing very high volume, you watch them train, and a lot of times this goes back to watching old footage of myself, and I think, yeah, like it's a hard set and I'm going to failure, but it's kind of either holistic failure or another area is failing before the area that I really want to target. And so now I've really dialed in my technique as well as my programming, as well as my effort, and that has resulted in not just needing less sets, but being able to handle less sets as well. Because if you're really taking a tissue to failure, you just can't do that much of it. The next I would say would be getting stronger. So when you are moving big weights, you're hefting those heaping helpings of heavy loads, you just can't do all that much of it, okay? Or you might have to vary things so that you're getting more out of less weight. And this is something a beginner probably doesn't even really need to think about. If I'm incline dumbbell curling 60 pounds, that is just going to be harder than someone doing 30 pounds, right? And I don't even think it scales linearly. It's not like that's twice as difficult. You know, John Hack deadlifting 900 pounds, that is more than twice as difficult, and it takes more than twice as much recovery ability compared to someone doing 450. They both might feel equally challenging, but they have a different kind of cost. The next is that I've had a few minor injuries and sort of tweaks, and I think a lot of that was just from doing too much. Technique obviously sometimes plays into this as well, but I think a lot of it was just not being able to recover session to session and accumulating a significant amount of fatigue, and that fatigue catching up in an acute manner, also known as an injury, because that really is the ultimate failure. I've also found that I've been able to warm up a lot more easily. I've had times in the past where I was doing kind of ridiculous volume, right? Like for a muscle group, 30, 35, 40 sets per week. And so you're kind of still sore, or not even just sore, because after a while you do adapt and you're not even really sore. You're just crunchy. you're just you're just crunching and like you're just beaten up. You can feel it. It takes a lot to warm up. Your joints hurt and you're not even really progressing. But hey, volume is the main driver of hypertrophy, right? Like it's optimal if you don't progress because that means you're getting in enough volume. No, right now I view volume as a means to progress. And if you're so beaten up that you can't perform and you can't progress, I think it's just a sign that you're doing either too much or doing it too hard. And the lever of doing less, but still doing it hard, is almost always the way to go. Make your sets quality and then adjust the quantity depending on how frequently you want to train them. By the way, this video is sponsored by Boostcamp. So progression is what matters most, and you should be tracking your training over time. If you are not, you are messing up. And if you're going to track, which you should, you might as well go with the best possible option, which is Boostcamp. Plus, you get access to some of the best programs out there. So if you're not really sure what to do, you're a little bit lost, hop on a fixed program. I have a bunch of free ones. There are a lot of other ones as well, depending on your goals. They will steer you right. And thank you to Boostcamp for sponsoring this video. And I almost think that if you can get away with massive amounts of volume, 40, 45, 50 sets on a muscle group per week, it is almost a sign that you're not advanced, right? Because as a beginner, you don't need very much at all. You'll grow from cardio. As an intermediate, you're in a weird position because you often have a high work capacity. You have that repeated bout effect, but you're not that strong. Maybe you don't necessarily know how to push yourself. Maybe you don't know exactly how to move to really take an area to failure. And so intermediates can absolutely get stuck in this trap where they are doing ridiculous amounts of volume and they can do it, but it might not be what is best for growth. So I think this more is better, more is more mentality really can bite intermediates the hardest of all. And I've heard stuff like, oh, GVS was advanced and then he gained a whole bunch of muscle. No, I wasn't advanced. That's the thing. I was intermediate in 2019. And I would say the more advanced I become, my definition of advanced has become more advanced. I've also sort of used more advanced techniques in the past 6 months, I would say. So sometimes rest pause, sometimes partials, sometimes forced reps or cheated reps beyond failure. And I've kind of returned to these after a while. My first book, Sweat, in 2019, had a whole bunch of these special workouts, exercises, and advanced techniques. It's 2 letters of the 5 letters. But for a while, I was reading the science like, oh, rest pause is no different. Oh, partials, they're no different, that kind of stuff. But I think they are. They're at the very least a way to chop down your volume. You get close to failure, and then you just kind of stay close to failure. I think where most people get them wrong is that they never actually go close to failure. So they start cheating or they start doing partials or they do a drop set and nothing ever slowed. So why are they dropping the weight? It's because they're kind of wimping out. And so when I do a set, as you can probably see in the B-roll, and this is just after a 3-day fast, by the way, they're hard sets. And I think that's what matters. You do your hard sets and then you scale them as needed. And Fazlifts actually just had a recent video where he talked about a young man doing 32 sets of lateral raises per week, and his side delts were not growing. And he's like, should I do 40? Is 50 the magic number? I think at that point, the issue is either technique or it's effort per set. As I said in the recent Q&A, if you have a big pile of shit that is your volume, adding more shit just results in that bigger pile of shit.
That is one big pile of shit.
You want to start piling up good, high-quality sets, and I would say 95 or more % of sets that I see in the gym are shit. And the reality is, lifting is complicated and it is difficult. When people are like, lifting is easy, lifting is simple, you're an idiot. Look around. How many people are getting phenomenal results? Very few. That's because most of the stuff that they are doing is shit. So my advice would be to auto-regulate your volume, but always start low. You wouldn't start with high volume and almost always crappy technique and effort. And then where do you go from there, right? Because people think if they drop their volume, there's no way they're going to grow because some study said this. more volume equals more gains. It's not really how it works. So start low and only add volume when you really, really need to. And most people are not going to need to for quite a long time. So if I say, hey, 2 to 3 sets, definitely start with 2 and really only add that third if you plateau and you feel good and your effort is on point and your technique is really, really good as well. You should not need to add sets for a very long time.
And I know this video might seem like a little bit of a surprise. I still think that most people are under training. They're not getting enough stimulus, and that is what is limiting them. It's just that they would be better off pulling the technique or effort levers rather than the volume lever, as is so often promoted by the science. And if you say, oh yeah, lower volumes can work, yeah, all of a sudden it's a bad thing and it's anti-science. So realize that you're dealing with biology. Biology is messy. Biology changes over time, especially as you are adding to your biology, and volume doesn't always necessarily need to go up over time. And if you reduce your volume, but you have better technique, you're getting more stimulus from the sets you're doing, the sets are harder, they're more focused, they're more intense, you might not need to go up in volume. You might even be able to go down in volume and get better results.
And I haven't shifted my beliefs 100%. It's not like I'm saying high intensity training, 1 set per muscle group per week, that's the way to go. You can't recover from anything more. No, I think Mentor was wrong about a hell of a lot of stuff. But it's also not 50 sets per muscle group per week. We have to have something reasonable. And for most people, setting a baseline of work that is relatively low and then increasing their effort, pains me to say it, but I think Greg's train harder than last time for the general population is really not the worst advice in the world. Improving your technique, learning biomechanics, learn the function of the muscles that you're trying to target, allowing you to train the muscles actually close to failure and to failure so that they grow off of that more moderate and modest amount of volume. And then really only increase that volume as needed if it helps progression. That is what will guide you correctly. What helps you progress? What ultimately helps you add weight to the bar, or dumbbells or cables or whatever. So let me know what you think. Always interested to hear your opinions on this. Volume is a little bit of a contentious topic. How much training volume do you do? Check out my books if you want to learn more about the deep depths of programming. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.